if you can kind of give me a thumbs up to let me know when you're ready to start, I'm ready to go, Mr. Smith.
Stand by.
Okay, so it is 5 o'clock and it is Monday, April 20th, and I'm calling to order the meeting of the Learning and Teaching and Policy Committee meetings for District 303. And we will start with welcome, and I believe Dr. Pearson has some words to start today.
Yes, thank you, Mr. McNally. I just wanted to have an opportunity to update you since our last meeting about some of the things that are going on across the district related to our COVID-19 response. As you all know, on Friday, the governor made an announcement that schools will not be in session in physical buildings for the rest of the year, but that we would be providing remote learning for all of our students. And we were able to notify families of that with that information on Friday afternoon with an email. Although not unexpected, I think it is disappointing for our teachers and many of our students. They look forward to this time of year when we have the opportunity to celebrate and recognize some of their accomplishments, and particularly students who are engaged or involved in milestone kinds of experiences. This is really disappointing, and we are trying to, we're working with our high school staff in particular to identify some ways that we could continue to honor and celebrate students, and that information will be coming within the next couple of weeks as we work through some plans, and then we also better understand what the expectations are from state and local officials regarding the size of groups and when groups can start to get together. And many of those pieces at this point are still unknown. As a matter of fact, today we received the word from NIU that they will not be hosting any events in their facility prior to August the 1st. So I think you heard that previously I had announced that July 25th was a possible date for a tentative alternate graduation time, and we are going to have to now push that back. So we're going to work with them to see if there might be another date available once they are able to allow groups to use their facility again. I think that this is a moving target, and so one of the things that we want to do is be very careful about making plans or announcements for events, because the last thing we want to do is to have to continue to cancel things for people. So we're working on some different options, and as things become available and we're able to make those announcements, we will. I also wanted to just reiterate a little bit about our breakfast and lunch distribution. Today we had our highest day ever of people picking up lunches. And I just want to say again to the community, those are available to any student in District 303. We would be happy for you to come by and pick up a breakfast and lunch. So please look on the website and you can see the different locations for those. And again, any student is able to pick those up. So please feel free to come by and get a lunch or a dinner. And then I just want to also remind people that with our current remote learning schedule, we do have remote learning planning days on Friday. There are 5 of those that are allowed in the remote learning plan. And we scheduled them on the first 5 Fridays of our remote learning. So they will continue on April 24th, which is of course this Friday, May the 1st, and May the 8th. Will continue to be remote learning planning days. And as you know by now, I'm sure that we've posted on the website some optional student activities that can be completed on remote learning planning days, as well as an SEL activity, a social and emotional learning activity that we're asking students to engage in on those days as well. And then, of course, the last day of school is scheduled to be May the 22nd. So that will be our final day of school for this school year. I also wanted to mention that I know that people will be looking for opportunities to go by the school building and pick up some of their materials. Maybe they left some things in their locker that they would like to collect before the end of the school year. Of course, we would like to have books, textbooks, library books, things that belong to the district. Of course, we want those to be returned as well. So we will put a plan together for people to be able to do that, to come to the buildings, to get their supplies and materials, and also to drop off anything that they need to return to the school district. Again, those plans will be coming forward within the next week or so, so that people will know what the plan is. And of course, we'll give plenty of time and notice so that people will know when their time is. We're going to have to be thoughtful about the number of people that we allow to come, and we'll have to have a staggered schedule of some kind. And so we'll be working on that plan going forward. So those are just the updates that I have for you today. Again, I thank you for your support. And that completes the COVID-19 update, Mr. McNally.
Okay, thank you. And next up, we would have citizens' comments. Do we have citizens' comments?
We do. We have 6 tonight.
Okay, then Ms. Barker, you're up.
All right. I do want to say, prior to reading my spiel about public comment, that due to the extenuating circumstances that are requiring us to meet in a virtual setting, we have decided to take public comment at the beginning of the meeting only. When we return to in-person meetings, we'll return to citizens' comments at the beginning and end of the meetings.
Mhm. Okay.
And so the school code provides for a public comment period at each board meeting subject to reasonable constraints. The practice of this board is to limit public comment to 3 minutes per speaker to a total of 30 minutes at the beginning of the meeting. Speakers addressing the board are expected to maintain a reasonable level of civility. Also, personnel matters are sensitive and confidential. Comments regarding individuals should be respectful. Insults and defamatory remarks have no place in this setting. The board will terminate public comment if speakers cannot adhere to these guidelines. Please identify yourself at the beginning of your remarks.
Thank you.
Tonight we have 6 comments. I'm going to read everyone's names in case they're hard to catch on the message. And then afterwards, please allow me a moment to share my sound. We have Jessica Giltso, Joe Blumquist, Michelle Castile, Michael Valiente, Danielle Penman, and Shannon Sullivan. One moment, please.
Good evening. My name is Jessica Kelso, and I'm a concerned parent of a kindergartner at Belle Graham. The purpose of me speaking to all of you tonight is to request a 4th section be added to 1st grade at Belle Graham for the 2021 school year. In addition, I want to request that if the cap is lowered from 27 to 25 per the administration's suggestion, it be lowered for not only kindergarten, but also 1st and 2nd grade for the 2021 school year. As you have heard, Belle Graham's kindergarten classes are at capacity. There are currently 3 half-day kindergartners that will be joining these students for 1st grade in the 2021 school year, bringing the total to 28 kids per class. Additionally, the Norton Lakes neighborhood next door to our school is nearing completion. Presumably, additional children will be registering to attend Belle Graham, and that needs to be planned for. The district needs to be proactive and assume class sizes will only grow throughout the year, as was demonstrated in the 1920 school year. I am not going to waste your time reciting the numerous reasons why smaller class sizes are beneficial to both children and teachers. That's established fact at this point, and I'm sure we're all in agreement that smaller class sizes are best. As Ms. Geyer stated so perfectly, there are few in education that would disagree with the statement that lower class sizes support classroom management, support interactions with students, and support student engagement. These are traumatic and stressful times for our children. 1st grade is a pivotal year of learning, shaping these children for the rest of their lives. These kids' educations have been derailed by this pandemic, and they are missing an entire quarter of crucial basics. As Dr. Pearson said, e-learning is no substitution for the learning that takes place in the classroom between the teachers and students. We need to minimize the educational impact of this pandemic. These kids will clearly struggle in the next school year after not having been in school for 6 months, and getting these kids back on track will not be easy. Our kids are all going to need additional help in the classroom that only smaller class sizes can provide with more one-on-one attention. And no, support staff popping in for a bit here and there is not adequate. By providing a 4th section to 1st grade at Belle Graham for the 2021 school year, as well as including 1st and 2nd grade in the cap of 25, you will be giving our children a fighting chance that they deserve after all they continue to go through. Ms. Geyer's data shows we have the room to add this section to first grade at Bell Graham, no matter what you lower the cap to. You know these classroom sizes are not ideal. You have the power to change that. Please do the right thing for our children and our amazing teachers and add a fourth section to first grade at Bell Graham for the 2021 school year. Thank you for your attention.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen of the board. This is Joe Blumquist, president of the SCEA. As we make our way through this unprecedented time of remote learning, I want to echo your sentiments about the enormous task our educators have undertaken to provide a high-quality educational experience for our students across the district. The D303 remote learning plan is a fantastic plan, but we also need to understand the strain it puts on some of our students and staff. The large majority, over 70% of our teachers, have expressed that they are working longer and harder during this time than they do in a traditional school setting. We are asking them for so much more than our comparable districts. We are asking them to provide the maximum recommended time for remote instruction. We are asking them to be responsive throughout the whole school day. We are asking them to be engaged in professional learning. And we are asking them to cover essential standards so we can ensure all students receive comparable instruction to their grade level peers. It is certainly uplifting to see what great work can be done when the professionals have had a hand in making it happen. This is true of any new initiative or curriculum coming into the district. Programs work most effectively when teachers are given the chance to immerse themselves in the work, looking at student performance, standards, and barriers to learning. It continues as we plan and prepare for implementation, immersing ourselves in every unit and lesson in advance so we can understand how it fits into the big picture and ensure that we have a strong knowledge to implement with fidelity. And it continues even beyond that as we reflect on our practice and examine the effects of instructional change. And without educator voice, without purposeful, dedicated time to make sure our plans are solid, there's a real tangible risk that our students will be negatively impacted by not responding to obstacles that are staring us in the face before we even start. When you hear me or any educator ask for more time, we are not asking to hit the pause button, but rather not to hit the fast forward button. We are asking for focused, meaningful, non-judgmental conversation and collaboration for new programs that the school board and the D303 community want to see not just implemented, but implemented well. This afternoon, you received a letter from our math CDT members who teach the courses you are discussing tonight: Algebra 1, Geometry, Geometry Honors, Algebra 2, and Algebra 2 Honors, as well as the in-program courses of the same subjects. Our math CDT members who teach the courses are in unanimous support for the resource change. They are also in unanimous opposition to the timeline being presented, and they are supportive of the timeline presented in the letter you received this afternoon. As we step into conversations around curriculum and teacher collaboration, I hope we will listen to the voices of our teachers who have shown us such high levels of professionalism during this unique point in our history. Thank you very much.
Michelle Casile. First, I'd like to comment on the high school math recommendation. As you know, high school math performance has declined for the last 3 years. The recommendation to use illustrative math as a high school resource for Algebra 1, 2, and Geometry has no data evidence of success, and no other comparable district is using illustrative math as a primary resource for high school. Other districts have 3 to 5 levels of rigor, while D303 has 2 levels. Illustrative math is a series of problem set workbooks with no instruction. How can this be the best option to teach high school math? Please invest in the best proven resources for our high school math students. Second, I'd like to comment on the K2 class size. Why is reducing K2 class size considered optional because of economic uncertainty? This should have been a priority before Fox Ridge was closed. Mrs. Penman on April 8th warned the board about economic uncertainty, but the board has already approved 22 Empower teachers in Northeast Academy. If the board is going to reduce K2 class size and change guidelines, you need more information from the facility and academic utilization plan. According to administration, we are out of space in our elementary schools either way, at 25 or 20 students. Before making a decision, please make sure you can reduce the cap and open new sections for each grade. If the cap is lower, will the administration cap and send students to another school. Please make sure administration plans appropriately for academic and special ed classrooms next year. Thank you for your time.
Hi, good afternoon. My name is Michael Valiente. I'm the son of 3 children here in St. Charles. The oldest, Anthony, 6, our middle son, Dominic, 3, and our youngest daughter, Olivia. Before I get into my comments, I want to first thank you for the opportunity to express my opinion on an issue that's very near and dear to my heart, which is some of the class sizes here, specifically at Bell Graham in the kindergarten class, and then the kids moving to first grade. I know nobody could plan for what's going on, and I know that the school board community has a lot on their hands. They try to balance these things, but I want to ask that you respectfully consider adding a 4th section to the first grade at Bell Graham. Again, I know it's likely one of many, and I fully acknowledge there's a lot of issues and concerns on the agenda as we are going through these COVID-19 and this pandemic outbreak. The speed of the pandemic is spread, and the quick reactions which were taken, I know, is no short undertaking. As the father of students in your school district, again, I personally want to say thank you. And I also fully acknowledge that St. Charles is a very desirable community with a strong school system. It's one of the reasons my family and I moved here in 2017. The ability to provide an education for our children is paramount. I know the strength of the school system is no secret, and it's led to a tremendous population growth within our school community. However, the class sizes are just simply getting too large. The classes will continue to be stressed moving into first grade with the addition of 3 additional half-day classes joining the first grade and the shortened, quote-unquote, in-person school year and additional homes being built in our community. I'm afraid if we don't add a 4th section of the first grade, I'm afraid our district and the children in our district, and specifically, my children and the children of everybody that has a say in this, will fall behind. I said before that I was a father of 3, and one of my sons is currently at Bell Graham. I'm also writing as a father of a child at Bell Graham who does receive extra intervention to assist in literacy and speech. The intervention he has received has been tremendous, and I don't want that to be lost in this request. But the teaching professionals at Bell Graham are second to none, and I firmly believe we should add to this incredible staff. I originally went to school to be a teacher, and I know how important student-teacher relationship is. And as much as my wife and I believe we're helping to continue our son's learning through e-learning, remote learning, it's just not the same as being in a classroom with a professional. And that goes to say what this profession actually is. For students in transition, being out of the classroom for as long as they have been, it's going to make that move to first grade tougher on them, let alone the teachers who will actually be taking on this challenge. I believe if a 4th section is added, it'll be to everybody's help. If it's not added, it's going to be to everybody's detriment, the students and the teaching professionals. Again, I want to thank you sincerely for your time, and I hope we have the opportunity to continue this, and thank you for considering adding a 4th section to the first graders at Bell Graham. Again, it's Michael Valiente, and I sincerely appreciate it. Thank you.
Hi, this is Danielle Penman. I'm calling to address the board and our administration. I just want to reiterate that because of the COVID epidemic that our country and our state and our county are going through, I'm very concerned and leery about the economic state that we will be in when this is over. We don't know when this is going to be over, and our state is already, numerous times our governor has spoken to the fact that we are in a financial crisis, and we may or may not be reimbursed any of the fees and any of the costs that we're putting out for this epidemic. I plead with our board to really reconsider some of the expenses that you have approved. Northeast Academy is an existing program. It services students in our district. I don't feel now is the time that we should be expanding on this program. Not now. I'm not saying never, just not now. I also am very leery about going forward with the next school year doing the extended day with Empower. This is a program that is going to cost our district a lot of money to facilitate and to get the resources for it. I just don't think now is fiscally a responsible time to be doing anything. We also have students that will be coming back into our school buildings next year that will be behind and will need extra resources. Next school year is not the time to implement new programming that's costing the district money and taking away from the needs of our students. I really urge you to reconsider and possibly revoke some of the voting that you've put in place. Now is not the time to do spending when we don't know what is going to be the final outcome economically to our district because of this epidemic. Thank you.
Hi, this is Shannon Sullivan. I just finished watching Governor Pritzker's daily brief today, and there was a specific question at the end of his briefing, probably within the last 10 minutes, if you want to go back and listen for yourself. The reporter asked or stated that we're starting to see school-specific budget projections related to COVID-19 impact in other states. Is there, is there an estimate yet for what districts can be planning for next school year in terms of funding? That was the question. Pritzker's answer was no. I felt it necessary to call and share this because I know that you guys are considering a lot of large expenses, and I am hoping that our board members are reevaluating decisions just because of the uncertain times that we're in. Programs, Northeast Academy, Empower, and other things that you guys are working towards. I'm not sure now is the best time to be moving forward with those type of large spending with so many unknowns. So that's all. Please take that into consideration. Have a great meeting.
And that concludes the comments for tonight.
Okay, thank you very much. All right, then. First up is our first item for discussion, and that is the high school math resource. What we're going to be doing today is there's going to be just a brief summary of what each item is. It was suggested, and it's probably a good idea for people just to get a brief outline. I do want to reiterate that all of these materials are online, including the presentations, and are available to the public. So please make sure you're taking a look at those. But we do have a brief summary of each item. So starting with high school math resource.
So Dr. Warren will be giving a brief overview.
Thank you. Thank you, Dr. Warren.
Good evening. Thank you for giving me the opportunity to provide an overview of our high school mathematics resource presentation and recommendation. We feel it is important to start by providing just some background and historical information. A CDT was formed back in 2011 to unpack the new math standards. And at that time, it was determined that we would stay with the same resource. Since we've transitioned from the ACT to the SAT, we have seen a decline in student performance that points to either misalignment and/or curriculum gaps. Aside from most algebra classes, geometry, algebra 2, and our honors courses have strayed from the district-approved resource. This was evident through walkthrough data and conversations with staff, and indicates we currently don't have a guaranteed and viable curriculum. This means that we need a curriculum focused enough that it can be adequately addressed within a school year, and that all students have the opportunity to learn critical content. The current CDT began meeting in January and has teacher representation from the 4 secondary schools and members of the Learning and Teaching Department. After vetting resources based on the Common Evaluation rubric, the CDT would like to recommend illustrative mathematics as the core resource for algebra, geometry, algebra 2, and their honors counterparts. It is important for us to identify our core experience for all students before we can begin to explore supporting resources for our struggling learners as well as honors. We believe the purpose of honors is to go deeper, and there are components within illustrative mathematics and beyond that will help us meet the needs of those students. It is also critically important for us to ensure vertical alignment so that our students are well prepared for their subsequent math course. Illustrative mathematics is a problem-based core curriculum designed to address content and practice standards to foster learning for all. It also prepares students to solve problems, reason, communicate, and think critically in the classroom and beyond. While the resource is relatively new, it has been rated by EdReports, an independent nonprofit designed to improve K-12 education. Illustrative Mathematics has earned a perfect score in all 3 gateways and is the highest rated high school math resource. In addition to Illustrative Mathematics, we would like to make the recommendation to purchase ALEX. ALEX is unique to McGraw-Hill and is aligned and fully integrated with Illustrative Mathematics to provide additional support with fluency and skills practice. In terms of professional learning, we'll provide resource implementation training with the publisher, allow for course team collaboration, and provide ongoing professional learning to support the instructional shifts and practices. For the 2020-2021 school year, that's a mouthful, we are recommending that we fully implement Illustrative Mathematics and ALEX into our algebra, geometry, and geometry honors courses. By doing so, this allows our students transitioning from middle school to high school to have continuity in their instructional programming. We're also recommending that we implement ALEX into our Algebra 2 and Algebra 2 honors courses next school year. This will allow teachers to become comfortable with the program as well as support our students transition back to in-person learning. In addition to implementation in the fall, we will begin the CDT work for pre-calculus and pre-calculus honors and further explore the potential for additional pathways based on student need. Our success indicators for this implementation will include classroom walkthroughs, common summative unit assessments, SAT suite of assessments, and stakeholder feedback. Again, thank you for your time for letting me provide a brief overview.
Okay, thank you. Now, as mentioned, the slides and the presentation have been online. Does anybody on the board have any comments, questions, or concerns regarding item 4A? Okay, Mrs. McCabe.
Good evening. Thank you. And thank you for a good presentation. I hope people get to watch it online. And it was nice to have that recap as well. It doesn't feel like we're starting from zero. I have a few questions, so bear with me for just a minute. In the CDT process, one of the questions I'm wondering about is if the current resource that we are using is aligned to the standards. And I think what you were saying was it isn't. So to continue with that resource would mean our curriculum is not aligned to the expectations that we have. Is that accurate?
Not exactly. So CPM is aligned to the standards. Our concern is that we've strayed from that resource. And so there's just some inconsistency, and we're not, it's difficult to pinpoint exactly what's happening in all the classes when we've strayed from that resource.
Okay, so so in order, if we were to continue to do another year of that, we would not be following through with what our 8th graders have had for 2 years. Is that right? And
correct. They've either had it for 2 years or for 1 year.
And then there would be a year of the old resource, or at least the old curriculum, and then they would go. Is that if we were not to adopt this for next year, correct?
That is correct.
Okay. That concerns me because our math scores are not anywhere where they're not where we need them to be, and to delay another year seems to be a disadvantage. However, I am interested in knowing how our, we have a lot of issues coming up for reentry for next year, no matter what the entire nation does. So in our, with our PLC work, and with the different professional learning work, all teachers are going to have to look to see where kids are. This isn't going to be just because we have a new curriculum in any place. Everybody's going to be in different places. Do you see, or have you begun to talk about how, when you have a new curriculum, and you have to look to see what gaps there are from the year before, how that might be supportive in getting kids to gain and learn and be engaged as quick as possible. I don't know if that makes sense, but
It does. And I think that's why the teachers are really excited about the ALEX program, because ALEX does two things. One, it is the artificial intelligence and computer adaptive assessment where it would create a personalized pathway for students. So that would allow us to identify the content gaps that our students would have. But it also is fully integrated with illustrative mathematics to provide that skills and fluency piece. So when teachers are going through an illustrative math lesson, it will specifically tell them what lesson in ALEX to assign to their students for that additional support. So that ALEX piece really, I think, is going to be really great for our teachers and for our students to drill down and identify exactly what our students' needs as they transition back into in-person learning.
great. I mean, it seems to me that there's going to be a lot of dependence on that professional learning. And the articulation, I assume, will also happen between the grades prior and the grades that kids are going into. That will affect every teacher. Is there talk about how 8th grade and high school teachers will discuss the areas that the 8th grade kids are coming in with or are missing? Is there that kind of articulation plan?
There is. So we had middle school teachers who teach high school math on the CDT, so they've been involved in the process. We would ideally, depending on where we're at in, this summer, to provide that professional learning in person where all teachers, regardless of the grade level or building that they're at, would have the opportunity to come together for collaboration. We also, the building principals have been incredibly supportive of giving us time on those SIP days to allow for further articulation. So we would utilize that SIP time throughout the school year as well.
I'm curious about early release at the high school. Will this be part of their work as well during that early release time?
It certainly could be, yes.
Is that typical?
I can't speak on behalf of exactly what's happening in all those early release, Ms. McKay, but I can certainly investigate that.
Okay, thanks. And I also wondered if there was a way that the work could begin with, even though they may not be able to meet together, can we meet? Is it possible to do the professional learning virtually or through I assume that's possible, but I just wanted to ask so that there's no delay in giving teachers the supports they need to go forward.
So similar to our K-5 ELA and middle school science, we're talking with all of the publishers about what that professional learning might look like. Ideally, face-to-face for a portion of it would be ideal. And so we're looking to see what pieces could be provided virtually. And if need be, all publishers are willing to provide all professional learning in an online format, a virtual format.
So and you may not have the answer to this yet, and it's months in advance. My assumption is that the assessments that we're going to do in the fall, when kids come back, are going to have a real deep purpose to figure out the gaps and to figure out where kids are. My wondering is, will the illustrative math program have the kinds of assessments we need so that teachers will know where the gaps are? They can at least have a chance to see how to fit things together. Is there going to be a smooth transition through one unit to the next?
I would say yes, through the support of ALEX as well as illustrative mathematics. Illustrative mathematics has both formative and summative assessments embedded within the program so that the teachers could use those assessments. And that would be our recommendation, to follow the program with fidelity. We did that with the middle school and saw a lot of success with it after the first year, and then to come back together and refine and reflect on our practice to see what changes are needed.
This is an overwhelming time. Anybody who knows anything about school, and I want to just thank all the teachers and administrators for the hard work that goes into determining this. And I do personally, as one board member, want to move forward for the kids. I recognize that may not seem like the right step to go forward right now. So I will really I expect that everyone's going to do their very best to support this kind of curriculum change, but all of our kids need that kind of work for next year. It's going to be a very different fall, no doubt about it. But I want to thank everyone for their deep work that they did on this, and I think we're headed in the right direction. That ends my questions. Thanks.
All right, anyone else? I'm sure, and I'm not going to see everybody's hand, but I did see Ms. Parker's hand, so.
Okay, and I know this doesn't come as a surprise, but I was given the opportunity with Mr. McNally to have a planning meeting last Friday for this meeting, and was able to ask quite a few of my questions. So following that, I really had to take a while over the weekend to think about things, and I'm still where I'm at, and I've struggled with this plan and the resource recommendation. And considering the importance of secondary math, I feel there's really not much I'm comfortable with moving forward. I'm going to say, Alex, I'm totally fine with moving forward with that. But beyond that, I was surprised to see there was no recommendation to include a change to the math, the pathways, that flow chart of courses. I would have assumed that would have been looked at and recommendations being made regarding that. We did hear in the presentation that future forward, perhaps they would look at that. When it comes to IM, illustrative math, there's three issues I'll focus on, and I'll try to make this concise. There are things that are in the program that are research-based. Every math curriculum has things that are research-based. The problem here is that the ink just dried on this. It is brand spanking new. It will be published with the 2020 date, and newer isn't always better. But that being said, there hasn't been any kind of data that suggests, or evidence that suggests, that this program in its entirety, Algebra 1, Geometry, or Algebra 2, that is saying that this works, and it works with our state assessment. There hasn't been enough time to even do that. And so I think as it was cited in the presentation and kind of the wrap up, it was top rated by Ed Reports. I'm going to tell you, Ed Reports is great. It's a useful resource, but it's not that kind of evidence that we're talking about. That's educators rating a resource. And while that can be helpful to get started, it doesn't give us the kind of information I think we're looking for given the spot we're in. So we really don't have any indication of how this curriculum performs. We know that there's some things that sound really good. William McCullum, one of the writers of Common Core, is on this, coming out of the University of Arizona. But in Illinois, we don't have any other districts that are really going for this. This isn't something that other high-performing districts are using in their math curriculum, and that also is something that we have a concern about. And there may be one high school district in the state that might be using it, but it wasn't quite sure if it's a pilot or actually purchasing. This curriculum is more of that problem-based model, which some of that may be good, but that problem-based model, that's where students work through problems to gain conceptual understanding. I think what we've had previous is that same thing, and now we're going with the curriculum that is wholly problem-based. While it's less collaborative, so less kids in groups working through packets, it still is that same type of model coming out of that area of the United States. And I'm wondering if that's the right fit for us in Illinois. And I do want to say that it is true that nobody typically has the same resource both in standard and in their honors course. That's unheard of. And I don't think the "Are you ready for more" section, as I looked at, is considered honors. I'm concerned about the lack of plan for our higher level students. And then I also feel that at this point, I'm not comfortable with this, definitely not comfortable, obviously, with consent, but even to take to action, I really feel like there's some things that need to happen. And I start with the changes in the course pathways to increase the opportunities for our students. When we flatten those opportunities, I really feel like it gets kids in either you're in an achieving classroom, the honors classroom, or you're in standard, and there may be no way to accelerate yourself or decelerate yourself, given the lack of that for a core. This is math. This is so important that we have other opportunities for our students. I'm not saying in every subject, but I mean, math is something where kids may want to step up and try something, and kids may feel comfortable in an accelerated rate, but not comfortable in honors, or not comfortable in standard. It just depends on, if you don't give students opportunities, then they aren't going to move. There's not going to be a lot of movement. So I feel like that needs to start there. I do feel like there needs to be a separate plan for the honors level courses. And I'd like to see a change in the resource selection, given that it's not something that we see our high performing districts in Illinois using. And then also I would like to see some details that include some proposed outcomes of improvement. So where do we want to get? I did see that, there's gonna be walkthroughs and things like that, but that's really more implementation. That isn't the purpose of why we're doing this. Is we need to improve SAT scores. So I feel like that never got touched on, about where we think this is going to take us. And truthfully, because this is so new, there isn't any history to say, okay, for the last 2 years, these, this is what the compendium research is saying. It's saying it does increase, scores, and here's the evidence. They don't have that. I do want to say, if Miss Weibel is not on anymore, she is ill, and she has asked me to just say a few things for her as well. She had wanted to see something with more explicit teaching, and including an honors algebra 1. And so that goes back to the options, I guess. So I am done. So I hope somebody else wants to talk.
I'll jump in here. Thank you very much, Mrs. Barker. I want to first thank the CDT for putting together all this work, and Dr. Warren for the presentation. A couple of things that I do like the vertical alignment with the middle schools. I think that is really important. That being said, I do have some concerns with implementation of this curriculum. It is not an easy task to implement this, and to me, August just seems very rushed. And I think it's important to have a nice polished delivery system for these students. And I can't see how we can approve this now and then in these times expect our teachers to be able to fully vet this and plan for it, and just be ready in August. So I struggle with approving this for implementation in August.
Ms. Fairgrieve, looks like you.
I did.
Go up.
Yes, yep, you're right. Just wanted to provide further support for Ms. Barker and Mr. Bryant's comments. Specifically, I'm interested in what the proposed outcomes are from the curriculum. So what are going to be the measures of success, not just from an implementation standpoint, but from a results standpoint. And then also to further carry forward Ms. Barker's point, I didn't see or hear anything about other districts in terms of where we might have looked to their results, and perhaps that's what we're aspiring to, and what best practices they might have and or curriculum they use. So those would be, I think, additional areas to support how we want to move forward. And then the final thing also I would say is I think from personal experience and also parent feedback that I get pretty consistently is how do we find that balance between instructor-led of comments, specifically in the honors level classes, and the collaboration that Ms. Barker talked about, the student problem solving and the packets that come out on a weekly basis. And perhaps the packets will change with the new curriculum, but the other pieces are really how that curriculum is delivered and implemented. So.
Okay, anyone else? I think that's just about everybody who's here. So I had a couple small questions that were not addressed with any of the others. One was regarding levels. It was mentioned that we have only 2 levels. My understanding was that we have really more than 2 levels for math matriculation. If you include, well, certainly special ed, but also if you include the pathways like the accelerated pathways that we have starting in middle school.
I mean, Ed, I think that Mr. McNally, I think there's more options in middle school to your point, but in high school, there really is standard or honors.
Right.
Okay.
And I think with special education, that's such an individualized situation. It's not necessarily a pathway.
Right. No, the reason I even brought up special education is in some of the materials we had received via email from at least one of the constituents was they had one district had 3 levels listed, and of those 3 levels, one of them was special ed. And so, but again, I was kind of tossing that aside as not really a level so much as, you know, it's another pathway. But I was looking at kind of the pathways starting with the Infinity and the AT as accelerated pathways that certainly they're identified earlier. And I can understand, I guess, the concern that you have then is kind of the on-off ramps once they get into high school, if I understand that correctly.
Yeah, I definitely think we can do a little better with math, especially to be able to offer those ramps for students. You know, there are times when a student is, you know, maybe very bright, but they're not sure they're ready. They want to do honors, or they have a heavy load that term. I mean, it can give variety to something. I think that it's been about 8 to 10 years since that change was made.
Yeah.
And so now we start to see there may be a result of not having those options for students. And I think that that's important to consider.
Okay. Does anybody from the team have any comments, thoughts on that?
Yes, I'd like to respond to concerns about explicit teaching versus a student-centered problem-based curriculum. When we think, I agree that a purpose should be to increase our achievement scores on the SAT. I want you to consider the kinds of problems that are present on the SAT. They are novel, problem-based situations our students need to solve. They are not the rote procedural problems that are present in an explicitly taught textbook, in a traditional math textbook. If we want our students to really be successful on the SAT, And more importantly in life, consider the situation we have right now with the COVID-19 crisis. Think about all the mathematical modeling that is present. A problem-based curriculum really teaches students how to engage in mathematical modeling, how to solve real problems with mathematical tools. That kind of teaching would not be present in an explicit textbook with worked out problems where students memorize procedures. That is not what we believe mathematics is right now in the district. The teachers have chosen illustrative mathematics as their favorite resource. All of the resources we evaluated were relatively new resources. CPM had the oldest copyright date of 2015. So when we think about research backing up these resources, none of the current resources have that kind of research that the board is asking for right now. But we do have experience with IM in the district. We've used it for 2 years in middle school. And after the first year of implementation, we saw a significant gains in not only achievement for our 8th grade and 7th grade students, but also in growth. In our 10 comparable districts, we were #1 in growth after 1 year of using illustrative mathematics. So I do believe we have some experience in that curriculum, although it is new for high school.
Okay, and the other question that I had kind of revolved around the background of, essentially the background of the authors, given that none of the resources have a real long history. What about the kind of the track record of the authors of the programs? Was that looked at at all? Anyone?
In terms of the authors from all the other programs, Mr. McNally, is that what you're asking?
I guess relatively speaking, did we take a look at the track record of the authors of the program that we're using, given that it's a new program? What has there been history been with other programs that they have maybe been involved with? I don't know if I'm asking that question well, but.
Are you asking if the author of the high school illustrative math has authored other? Is that what
Well, right, and does he have a track record of success with other materials, with other resources he's worked with?
I don't have that information. Tina, do you?
Dr. McCallum is authored the 6-8 high school. I'm sorry, the middle school IM, and currently they are piloting a K-5 program as well. Those are the programs he's been involved in. After he led the team that wrote the Common Core standards, he actually said that creating a curriculum resource that would support those standards was the hardest work that he's ever done. And I do want to add that there are 4 districts in Illinois who are currently using IM, although they are not comparable to St. Charles. They are the East Moline School District, the Kankakee School District, and the Valley View Romeo School District, and also Hyde Park Academy in Chicago. Even though the resource is new, it has been piloted for 2 years nationally.
Okay.
Yeah, you're right. Those particular schools and districts, they're not the highest performing districts in the state. High school districts, unit districts with high school. And maybe, they may see an increase, and I certainly wish them luck with that. I just am looking at a situation where, yes, I'm aware of how the SAT presents problems. However, there's a lot of material that would support both having that concept development come from problem solving, but also maybe that is a little more blended. I understand that you looked at 5 new resources. I don't know what those are, other than the one we currently have. But there was some dissent among this CDT, and that not every teacher marked it as a favorite.
I'm confused. We received a letter that said the CDT people did support it. So I feel like there are two issues going on here. One is, is it the resource, yes or no? And then implementation, yes or no? We got quite a strong letter that said this was the resource the teachers agreed with. Their issue was the implementation. I'm hearing board members say they don't like the resource itself. So I'm a little confused as to what we're landing on.
Well, I think there's a couple.
What the board's role is.
I think there's the plan and its level of detail, its outcome, and what the plan is for that. There was, what's the plan for a result, and then also, implementation does lend itself to difficult timeline given the virtual world we're living in. So I think it's more than two things. I think it starts to expand into, is the plan ready at this point? And like I said, I don't have any concerns regarding Alex. I think that.
Yeah, I just to kind of echo what Ms. McCabe said. I think my understanding was that the resource itself was not an issue with the CDT. That it was an issue with implementation and a timeline for implementation, particularly in light of what's going on now. That was my understanding. So if I'm mistaken, disabuse me of the notion, but that's what I had felt was the case.
You're referencing a letter we received different that I'm not referencing. So that I'm referencing the information we received about the CDT process from the superintendent.
Okay.
And so I'm curious to know then a little bit more, but that's not something for, I guess, right now. But I think what we need to decide is this ready to move on to board action? I would say I don't feel it's ready in this package.
Okay. And I guess I can just kind of poll everybody here and ask them how they feel then. So feel free to chime in. We've heard from Ms. Barker and we've got a couple others. Okay, Ms. Fairgrieve.
I would agree with Ms. Barker. I would like to see more in terms of what are the expected outcomes and the timing for those outcomes when we implement this curriculum. Is it a 2-year transition, and then we should expect to see some improvements, not just in SAT, but perhaps there's other measures of success as well, or just how long should it take for this investment?
Okay, so I guess kind of the question I'm asking is, Ms. Barker suggested perhaps we not have this for board action, and I suppose
I'm in agreement with that.
Okay, I was going to say, I suppose we can always put it on for action and it would either go up or down, but we should probably poll people to determine their feelings. Dr. McKidd?
What happens if we don't do action on it? Dr. Pearson, what would happen?
Yeah, if we don't take action on it in May, we're going to lose our window of opportunity for adoption for next school year. So we would need to put it off for another year and do the planning that you talked about. I think we were working on a plan for some of the courses that were not identified as a part of the algebra, geometry, and algebra 2. I think I've said in several meetings, so this is not a secret to anyone, I have significant concerns about the experience that our high school students are having in Algebra 1, Geometry, and Algebra 2 at the high school. We have data that suggests that our students are underperforming, not only underperforming, but their performing doesn't match the kind of performance that should be expected from students in a district of our caliber. I also feel like that we've demonstrated with the achievement gains that have been made at the middle school, significant gains under the illustrative mathematics curriculum, that it is possible that our students can do very well with that. I also have concerns about the fact that we now have students who have had illustrative math for 7th and 8th grade that are going to be coming to the high school, and they're going to be stepping back into an old curriculum that hasn't been refreshed and that doesn't really align as well to what they've experienced in middle school. And I think I've expressed all of those things. And I understand you wanting to have a complete plan. To your timeline, Mrs. Fairgrieve, I would suggest that our students would see almost immediate improvement in their math achievement in the classes that we offer this new curriculum in for next year, and that data would be evident as part of their PSAT that they take. So I would, I think the sad thing is that we didn't have a spring assessment this year, so we don't have really this year's data at the middle school to look at because we didn't take the ISAT, so I feel like if we wait longer, it's just going to be one more year of waiting and we'll be that much further behind in the implementation cycle. And I think I expressed that as well. But we're happy to listen to what it is you're looking for as a board. And if you'd like us to take it off the table, then we'll spend the next year working on it and bring it back to you next spring.
What about piloting and adding in Alex for what you intended to add in Alex for, and then piloting?
Well, I do have concerns about providing some of our students with a curriculum that's aligned and other students with a different experience in any course. So if we were going to pilot it, I would want it to be piloted in an entire course at the high school. So that meant like all of Algebra 1 or all of geometry, as opposed to, 2 or 3 teachers that are willing to move forward with the curriculum, and then other teachers that are not. That also creates a significant problem for the PLCs because they're not going to be working in groups that are looking at the same implementation cycle. So it further perpetuates the problem that we already have, which is a gap between classes and courses at the high school, because people have over the years, and it's no one's fault, this is not putting blame on anyone, but over the years, things have evolved to a point where I would say that we are not implementing CPM with fidelity in geometry or Algebra 2. That Algebra 1 is probably the only place that is happening. So, I certainly would be, I don't know, Tina, you or Christine will have to tell us if we can purchase Alex separately. My understanding was that it was part of the package that came from McGraw-Hill, but I don't know if there's a separate purchase price for Alex, but that is also something that we could look at. So you'd have to tell us that. Christine, do you know?
Yeah, it can be purchased as a supplemental resource. There are certainly pros and cons to doing that detached from illustrative math and then going into the following year and integrating. So there are pros and cons to either approach.
I think as it stands now, we don't have a tool at the high school that will allow students to fill gaps that might be present from this last quarter of remote learning. So it would be difficult with our current curriculum to fill some of those gaps.
That's where I keep landing, is that we're going into a situation where it's really different. It's going to be totally different than what we've ever experienced. If I had an 8th grader right now, I'd be very concerned about what they're not able to really master and move into the high school. So my expectation would be that the high school teachers are going to take time and energy to figure out what my kiddo needs. If the curriculum that we were using is not aligned for whatever reason, as a parent, I would want my kid to get what's aligned, because it's already going to be difficult to catch up. I have great faith in our teachers. I work in a lot of districts. Our teachers are fabulous. That doesn't mean that the resource has always been the best. So for me, I get how hard it's going to be to implement things. It's going to be hard, period. We're going to have a lot of work to have to support our teachers. If there are concerns that board members have that are specific that could be answered, I'd hate to delay a year because there's already going to be a big enough, I don't know if gap is the right word, but they're going to be in all different places. I'd rather that they were getting what we were headed towards. So that's where I land right now.
Okay, and I'll jump in here, kind of on that same note, that one of the things that I have a concern with is the continuum. I know that the middle school has been using this. I would not be in favor of a partial piloting of this. I think it's a kind of an all or nothing, so that we're talking about consistency. We can't have that if we're going to partially pilot a program. So the one thing we do know is that we have a program that doesn't work. Right now, we're certain that we have a program that's not working. This is a 3-year, if I'm not mistaken, am I correct? 3-year contract. So it's not as long as other contracts. It's certainly not the, 9 years that we've been using the other, however many years it's been, we've been using the other program that has fallen apparently into further and further disarray. The one thing I'm concerned with is our kids don't get to redo it when we get it wrong. And I think that we know we have it wrong right now. And I would like to see us consider moving forward just so that we can have a chance to go in the right direction. We'll have 3 years of data and of our own data to determine whether or not it succeeded. But like I say, right now, I don't think we hold on to what's broken because what we're considering might not be perfect.
I have, and I can echo that as far as, yes, we know this is broken partly because of some instructional practices too. But I don't want to make a mistake here because, Becky, I do have an 8th grader. So does Ed, but we're kind of sitting on different sides of the fence. Is it the devil you know? Or, and can we work on different, using different instructional practices as part of this package to do some professional learning around changing those instructional practices while we really get a plan in place. It's just the plan is not there, and I understand that we know that this has got to change. And perhaps when we said it's got to change fast in October, we expected there to be, a big overhaul. And I think what I'm not seeing is that big overhaul. So I feel like this still needs to be at the drawing board level. I am fine with adding a separate package of ALEKS and starting at that point and beginning to look at how that supports students in gaining what they lost for that quarter. But I have big concerns. And I will have that be 2 kids in high school. For me, and a lot of community members, as Ms. Fairgraves did say, the community is very concerned as well. I will say that I have experiences with open up resource in middle school, and I've heard experiences that are they really are similar because of the way that perhaps it's an instructional practice issue, but also the way that there's a lack of learner support within these resources, these workbooks. It does not provide students any way to be able to look at different ways of doing something. It has just a very short summary. And once you're done with the workbook, those are gone. There's no way to reference something when you need to look it up. There's a short glossary, but it's just not ideal on the learner end in that way. So I feel as though, and we already know that the procedural fluency is already an issue. And I know, Tina, you did a lot of work to shore up the fifth to sixth grade gap that with this program that when it was implemented, I don't know that it was realized or I wasn't there. You were there, obviously. What haven't we realized is missing out of this stuff because it hasn't gone through, you know, it's not in its second or third year where some of those kinks have been worked out. And are we using our kids as guinea pigs?
Well, I think in some ways it's kind of the opposite of the fifth grade continuum, is that currently the things that students are learning in eighth grade we're still being taught in high school. So that's part of our alignment issue. If we don't go to a new resource, we don't have good standards alignment in freshman algebra and in high school geometry. And then therefore students aren't prepared well for algebra 2. So it's kind of the opposite problem. It's not what we're missing, it's what we're currently not doing in our high school math courses.
Okay, any other questions, thoughts? I would say that at this point that at a bare minimum, we probably need to move this off consent and put it for action. Is that, other people have that thought? I see some nodding heads.
I mean, yeah, obviously consent isn't, you know, it's not, I'm not comfortable there, obviously, but I also feel this needs to stay in committee. So I don't know where we're all at, but.
Well, for my part, I would like to, I'd like to consider the program. And certainly if it goes to the, for action and it fails, then it would come, excuse me, would come back to the committee anyway. So,
but I think Dr. Pearson said then it's dead, correct? It's too late.
it's too late for this year, yes.
Okay. All right. I just want to make sure I understood.
Can we separate out? There are different pieces to this. Certainly separating it out.
You want Alex as a separate item, Alex as one item and illustrative math as another item?
Yeah.
Okay.
That sounds like it's, Ms. Fairgrieve, that your thought as well? Dr. McCabe?
Yeah, but I'm going to have to do get a little more information on Alex, because if it's a separate thing, does it work with what we're doing? Is it going to change instructional practice if that's the concern? I mean, is it just a tool that isn't going to be used because it isn't connected to the curriculum? Those are questions I would have now. So, which I think could be answered by the board meeting. I don't think that's something to hold it up. So you can do it two different things. I just can't tell you whether I understand how to vote.
Yeah, no, I guess really right now I'm just saying, should we separate it out, Alex, and then the IM? It looks like that seems to be sort of a consensus here. And I'm okay with that. I have the same question regarding Alex as well, though, is whether or not that's something that would be, you know, how well that would be implemented on its own, separate from this, given that people have been kind of expecting it to be part of this. But if it's a valuable tool that can be used with other curricula, then I'm okay with that.
I'm sure you guys will look at that, but Alex actually has been around before this curriculum. So, I mean, it is a separate item.
No, I'm aware of that. That's my concern was not, it's just that we've been looking at it in conjunction with this, and we've kind of been writing things and talking about things and how we would use Alex in conjunction with this. And that would kind of take us back to the drawing board with how we're going to use Alex. So, but again, that's something that, as Becky said, I'm sure we can have an answer for that by the board meeting. So, okay. Any other thoughts? Okay, so it looks like what we're going to be doing on that one is separating that into two items. One item is Alex, and the other item is illustrative math resource. Is that accurate?
Would that illustrative math be with Alex though?
I would expect that it would be illustrative math with Alex or Alex standalone.
Thank you.
Is that everyone else's understanding? That's what I had, but
Yeah, I agree.
We would vote on the illustrative math and Alex together, and then if that fails, we would vote on Alex after that then. Is that correct?
Yes.
that would be my understanding.
Yeah.
Yes. Okay. All right. Next up is the middle school math pilot.
And we'll welcome back Mrs. King to kind of give you an overview of this one.
Thank you. In 2018, the Board of Education approved Illustrative Mathematics, published by Open Up, as a primary resource for middle school mathematics, and 10 marks as a supplemental digital resource for fluency. Unfortunately, after the approval, 10 marks went out of business, and we have been searching for alternative digital resources for middle school. Tonight, we are proposing a recommendation for a pilot of a digital math enhancement for middle school. Desmos. Desmos has adapted some problems in our current resource and created digital interactive experiences for students. Desmos will not replace our current primary text, but will supplement it. The Desmos experience will help students develop conceptual understanding by visualizing connections between equations and graphs. Desmos makes math visual. Students will still do math problems on paper and receive print textbooks. The pilot is for the 2021 school year for 7th grade standard level math classes at both Thompson and Redling. Teachers at both schools are enthusiastic about the possibility of using Desmos in the classroom. Professional learning will be provided by Desmos as part of the pilot project. In a competitive application process, 1,500 school districts applied for the pilot program, and over 100 school districts were accepted, and District 303 was chosen to participate in the pilot. We are excited about this opportunity, and there is no cost to the program. The district will actually save $12 per student because the Desmos print and digital resources cost less than the Open Up text.
Sorry, I had myself muted. So on first of all, any questions, comments, concerns on Desmos? Okay, none.
I don't think I realized that it's only for the standard. 7th grade advanced will not be participating. Is that correct?
Because I could hear the question. The question was, would the accelerated students be participating in the pilot? They would participate in some of the activities in the 7th grade curriculum of Desmos, but because they also do the 8th grade math curriculum, they might not have those resources for their 8th grade books at this time. So that's why we've chosen the standard level course for the pilot, but teachers would still be able to use some of the activities in the accelerated program.
Okay, answered. Okay, and the only other the question that I had brought up in our meeting the other day, and I just wanted to point out the resource, the workbook, is essentially the same material with some things taken out and converted to a more hands-on experience. Is that inaccurate?
Yes, that is an accurate representation of the program. Desmos, because illustrative mathematics is an open resource, Desmos was able to adapt some of the problems and create these digital experiences for students.
Okay, so we won't be losing any of the resource that we've already had. We're really essentially enhancing what we've got.
Exactly.
Okay. All right. Any other questions, thoughts, concerns on that item, item B? Okay, then I think we can move on to item C, Empower Elementary School Extended Day Resource Recommendation.
Before we go there, moving the middle school math pilot to consent agenda then.
Oh, yes, I'm sorry. I do that all the time. I kind of assume we're, yes, for the consent agenda. My apologies.
Great. So then with the Empower, I know that Mrs. Pam Jensen is going to give you an overview of the Empower presentation. And then we have members from L&T, Dr. Burns, Dr. Roosh, and Ms. Wagner, who will also be able to answer questions that you have.
Okay.
Good evening. Thank you for allowing me to present an overview for you tonight. The presentation on Empower provides an update on the work that has taken place since our January Learning and Teaching Committee presentation. In response to stakeholder feedback, we designed 9 modules for these learning experiences. The Empower experiences were designed with the cross-sector employability competencies and the board-approved social emotional learning standards as the core skills embedded into each module. The competencies and SEL standards have been built as learning progressions for kindergarten through 5th grade. From there, each module was designed using Larry Ainsworth's rigorous curriculum design and the C3 inquiry design model as a framework. The modules designed were based on feedback from the community and the think tank group. We worked to design an array of experiences that would satisfy all the components of the competencies, social emotional standards, types of play, and movement strategies. The 9 module frameworks have been developed, but ultimately the Empower teachers who will be teaching these experiences will design the final learning experiences and lesson plans, keeping in mind their individual students. All Empower experiences are aligned with our strategic commitment of innovative learning and are personalized, authentic, responsive, and competency-based. Our goal is to empower our students and honor student agency, which refers to learning through activities that are meaningful and relevant to learners, driven by their interest, and often self-initiated with appropriate guidance from teachers. Included in this presentation is a review of the Empower experiences and guiding principles, a review of the 9 modules, as well as the Empower scope and sequence. The Make It to the End module is highlighted as an example, which includes the module components, an explanation of the competency and social emotional learning progression, as well as the method of assessment and sample activities. The presentation wraps up with information regarding the Empower budget, professional learning for Empower teachers, and how we plan to continue to engage stakeholders through collecting feedback and development of a creative council. The administration recommends that the Empower budget be placed on the consent agenda for the approval at the May 11th, 2020 school board meeting. Thank you.
Okay, any comments, thoughts, concerns on that item? I don't, Ms. McCabe, Dr. McCabe.
I don't want to always be the first one to ask questions, guys.
That's why I myself.
I'm very excited about Empower. I think it's what our families had said they wanted, and it's doing the kinds of things that are going to make our kids really well balanced. And I really appreciate the work through all this other stuff that's going on. You are developing an outstanding curriculum. And it isn't going to be perfect the first time they do it, but I really believe the kids are going to come out with some really great skills. And I'm very excited about it. I have a couple of questions. I'm again wondering about the support teachers we'll get. And in the presentation, you talked about that they would have, the Empower teachers would have PLCs. I wondered if we would have an instructional support coach who would be working with them, or will they be a team themselves? Because they're going to be dealing with different skills than just the academic skills. So I was wondering how you were looking at how teachers will get that support during the process, during the teaching.
So I can speak to that one. We currently have one of our instructional support coaches supporting us by planning the summer professional learning for the Empower teachers, which will be 1 week long in June. And that will be developed based on 3 core texts that we're going to be using to help build those teacher mindsets, and also take a deep dive into the 9 modules that have been developed. And then throughout the school year, the Empower teachers will function as a PLC, as a group of Empower teachers, as well as being connected closely with their ISC at the building level.
And so will classroom teach, what's the connection Empower teachers and classroom teachers will have?
So that's a great question. So the classroom teacher and the Empower teacher will connect closely by module, and the Empower teacher will help the classroom teacher by informing those report card competencies, because we are basing the Empowered modules on the career and life competencies. That's what we're really hoping to bleed through to the core.
And could you explain just a little more about the choice? Because some of the things that I had heard was from our CAC folks was, do kids have a choice? And it looks like the class will have a choice. Could you just explain how that will look? I saw what was required.
Yeah, I'm going to have Ms. Wagner speak to that a little bit.
Where are you, Susie?
So, hi, how are you? So in the scope and sequence, the way that we had laid it out in the presentation is that K1 will have more of an exploratory model. So that's going to be modeled kind of similar to how you would see in a K1 classroom, where students might be set up in stations and they may rotate through. So the first module that they may be introduced to might be a Get On Board module. Where they will learn how to play those board games in a rotational center manner. And then the students will learn other skills from other modules as well. So now we might be adding in something like a Make It to the End module, where they're now adding in that Rube Goldberg machine. So depending on what skills they're going to be introduced to, that would be added to their rotational center. And then as they go up into the upper grades, all of them are going to start out with that Get Out and Play. We really think that that's a really important module to kick off the school year. It really it reinforces that team building and those competencies, establishing that at the beginning of the year. And then they will have 4 modules that they're able to choose from. So the group will get together, and whichever one they want to choose from first, they would introduce that. They'll determine the time frame, how long they plan to spend in this module. So it will be based as a group. And then they will work through that module and then introduce another module after that. Now, that doesn't mean to say that when that's over that they can't go back into other modules. They could absolutely use some of those skills that they've learned and those activities that they've been doing along the way as well.
So
then,
it's,
no, go right ahead.
So it's possible that a second grade could, of 3 or 4 sections, that Empower teacher could be doing different modules based on the class, or will the whole grade level have a choice?
So what we're hoping for is that it's really based on that class experience, but depending on what that looks like. So there may be that second grade group as a whole all chooses to do Rube Goldberg right away. They all want to get on that module. So it really depends on the building, the students, and that teacher, how they want to roll that out.
So it gives some personalization and some choice. The kids are starting to get a voice.
That's right.
Learning. Okay, thank you for explaining that. I like the communication you built in, because I think parents are going to want to know what's going on. I like that creative council. I think you were talking about that the kids will have a voice as well. And weren't we going to have the kids have a voice during this last part? Darn it. Is there any way you can do that remotely, that we could do a survey so you can hear from the kid? I can tell you that there are kids who are just missing school immensely. And there are kids who are just as happy as can be, but is there a way we can get their voice still here at the end of school? Mrs. Geyer?
We can certainly look into that. I think the part that we felt was really important to have children give us some input in was they needed to experience something, just to talk to them without having some sort of experience. So how they had laid it out was each grade level would get a different experience, and then they could give us some feedback. So it's not that it can't be done. I just think we may have to go back to the drawing table and see if there's something else we could do.
Okay. It was a nice component.
Sure.
I mean, this is a whole new content area, so that was a nice component.
I think that is another reason why the group was so adamant of through every module next year to collect feedback from the students instantly, so that we have it in order to plan for the following year.
Okay. 3 real quick questions. I wondered about how remote learning would look with this, because there's a chance we may be in this situation again in the fall. And how the financial part, you know, I would like to know, I think we're going to have more discussion at business services, but it is creeping in. You keep hearing how finances around the state are, so that's in my mind. And then I wondered how the hiring was going. So those are my last 3 questions.
I can speak to the remote learning piece a little bit. I think one of the best things about how we've designed Empower is through the competencies and the social emotional learning skills. And if you remember back to when we first presented this to learning and teaching, the video that we showed of the student engaging in the Rube Goldberg machine, that wasn't in the school setting. That student was engaging in that type of learning at their house. So I think the inherent nature of this experience, building based in competencies like problem solving, critical thinking, students can engage in that type of skill building regardless of what their physical setting looks like. So however we are moving forward, we will be intentionally planning with that environment in mind, but we are confident that it will be able to happen with those competencies in mind.
Thank you.
I can talk a little bit about the hiring. We are finalizing the people that have interviewed and that we feel are the best choices for each building this week. Actually, the team worked together today again with the principals to make that happen so that we can have them on the recommendation for the May 11th board meeting. So we're there with that. So as you talk about the budget, this is part of our current budget that we had put in place as we were planning for this year, that we would have this money to purchase additional materials. And then the team also has written grants that we don't have yet, but we will for all the iPads and the technology. So that doesn't come from district funds. And we will make it work if those grants are not, if we don't get them right now with this, we'll make it work without the additional iPads as we go forward next year. So, and then a couple other things as we went ahead and did staffing out of our contract negotiations last year. We knew we had to have about 24 additional personnel for art, music, and Empower. Art, music, physical education, and Empower. So that was also put into our staffing budget.
Thank you. I'm very excited for us. I think it's, you've done great work in a very short period of time. I'm not surprised. I'm very excited for what our kids are going to have. Right now, it just feels amazing and overwhelming that we can pull all this together. So again, I'm very grateful for the work you've done. Thank you.
Okay, any other thoughts, concerns, Ms. Fairgrieve?
Yeah, first of all, I did want to just tell the team, I echo Mrs. McCabe's sentiments. I think that you've done a lot of great work in a very short amount of time. And I, just from my background, I love hearing about employability competencies. And there's just, I think, a lot of emphasis on the social emotional learning piece that I don't know that we can ever really have enough. So I do want to recognize the team for that. With that said, I want to make what might be a radical, perceived as a radical statement or question. I would pose to the board and the team is that we ask ourselves, is this the time that we want to invest? This is a multi-million-dollar price tag, all in. Is this the time that we really want to do that? I share a lot of concerns. We're entering into a global recession. We have 22 million people that are unemployed. We'll probably hit 15% by the end of this quarter. And is this the time to be making such an investment? While it is very innovative and I applaud that, is this the right time to be doing that? So that's just my comment, Mr. McNally.
Okay. Mr. Bryant.
I actually had something very similar in my notes, Ms. Fairgrieve. I love every bit of this program. I think it can be so beneficial to every student in the district, every elementary school, and every student in the district. However, there is just so much uncertainty here. I think we as a board really need to look at what our revenues are going to be for next year. Although we did, it was already put into the budget. If our revenues drastically decrease, we're looking at $2 million that we're looking to spend on this. And is that responsible? Is that a responsible use of the money when we don't know exactly what we're looking at in terms of revenue? So yeah, it is a radical idea, but it is something that I thought about as well.
Okay, and Ms. Barker, it looked like you had something to say there. Okay, you do.
I'm going to say very, very similarly. All along as we've been seeing this, I feel as though there's so many great things that Empower can offer our students. It's hard to pick your favorite. It really is. And I know this was a lot of work, and but I'm going to have to echo the same sentiment. Where I have someone joining me, but I had to echo the same sentiment. Is there a way to put the pause button, or is there a way to do this differently for this year and this uncertainty that we have? Dr. Pearson, could you kind of help us out with that?
Yeah, so first of all, I want you to know that next week at Business Services, we plan to provide you with an update on the financial situation. You actually got a memo early on from Dr. Chapman, just kind of talking a little bit about some of our revenue and expenditure categories and where we sit with those things. That being said, we did plan for this implementation and included it in our budget as part of our plan moving forward related to the current teacher contract that we have. We did negotiate a longer elementary day as part of our contract. So we have certainly planned for that in our budget plans. But I think it would be important for you to have that piece of information about how our current situation is going to impact our revenue and expenditures. So hopefully that discussion next Monday will be helpful as you think about this decision. So I think it might be premature about talking about changing it until we have a chance maybe to look at the kind of what the positives and negatives are related to our current financial situation next week.
Okay, any other thoughts?
I think it was Dr. Byrne, you mentioned that professional development would be happening in June. Is that correct? So yes. If we still cannot have in-person, face-to-face meetings, will that be done virtually?
Yes. So we are planning for both right now. So if we can have it in person, that would be great. And then if not, we have a plan to complete that virtually as well.
Okay.
Okay, so is this something then we're thinking about, since we're going to get more information, then we can talk more at the board meeting for action then?
I was just going to say again, we have several board members who have expressed a desire for more information and some reservations. So I have a feeling this would be pulled from consent anyway. So what are your thoughts? Should this be put on for action or left on consent?
It should go to action.
Yes. Action item. Okay. All right. It sounds like Ms. Barker, I think you said action, but I'm not sure. And Mr. Bryant? I can't hear him. Action. Okay, so I think we'll move that to action then. And so next up is the class size, item D, class size for primary.
Guess I better unmute before I do that.
There
I'll
we go.
provide you with that synopsis. District administration has been asked to provide information that considers reducing the maximum cap of a primary classroom from the current guidance of 27 students. As a reminder, beginning with the 2018-2019 school year, the class size maximum or cap was reduced from 29 students to 27 students in all K through 5 classrooms. Early spring of each year, we begin the process of determining staffing for the next school year. We are still in the early stages of planning for the 2020-2021 school year. It began with kindergarten registration and continues with intra-district transfers, which closed today, returning student registration, which begins later this month, and ongoing move-ins and move-outs throughout the summer. As we monitor enrollment, any sections that are at or closely approaching the cap are monitored for the possibility of adding additional sections or initiating the cap and send practice to another district school. In the presentation, we provided models that show reduced caps in K2 at 25 and 20. And we also showed a kindergarten only model with a cap at 25. The financial impact and space needs were presented with each model. As noted in the presentation, if the board would like to move forward with lowering the class size guidelines for K2, district administration suggests the class size model of 25 and to affect the change in the 2021-2022 school year. The kindergarten only model with a cap at 25 beginning in the 2020-2021 school year and maintaining that change as we move forward through first and second grade is another consideration.
Okay. Any thoughts? Anyone comment? Becky, Ms. Fairgreen beat you to it, I think. Okay.
Mrs. Geyer, can you recap again what the recommendation is? The K through 2 is 25, starting in the 2021 to 22 school year?
Yes.
Okay.
Or if you wanted to start at the kindergarten this school year, next school year, 2021, and then every year we would roll that up to second grade. So we would have kindergarten and first grade in the 21-22, and then kindergarten first and second in the 22-23.
Okay. Can I ask what the team's thought process was about waiting a year to lower the cap size to 25?
I think there again, we were looking at, this is not something we plan for in the budget going forward with staffing. And so that it would make more sense that we could plan for it going to next year.
Okay, all right, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, you're up.
Okay, thank you, Mrs. Hargrave, for going first. So if we were to go with the kindergarten for next year, if there was a class that's on the bubble, would that impact it at all? Or could you, if you had a class where you thought we need to open another section, you would still be able to do that?
We believe at the kindergarten level, we could, and it would probably at this point, unless we had the reason we use this year's numbers is we know from about March until August, for the last 3 years, we have received an additional 150 to 175 kindergarten students. So we are, and that actually follows Mr. Shazar's enrollment projections. We are about 140 away from his enrollment projection of 802 students at this point. So it follows our, trend survey information that we have and enrollment numbers. So we do feel that it would be an additional one teacher at this time for, now what I think we always have to look at also is, unfortunately, students don't come in nice packages. And if at Munhall we need 5 more students, they always show up at Belgraham. I mean, that is just how it works in enrollment, you know, and I wish that they all, you know, came in nice packages, that we could just have 25 at every school, but that doesn't always work. But what I think we have to then, what we think about as administrators is it more cost effective? Are we at a tipping point where we should add another teacher? Or are there only 2 or 3 and we have so much space at a school right next door that it's better to initiate the cap and send?
But so it's still a possibility, no matter what the board does, if there was a grade level that wasn't impacted by our decision, you would still look at class limit.
Well, within the guidelines that are given. So if the guidelines are 27, that's what I'm going to look at.
Right. Okay.
You know, I mean, because and here's where it gets a little sticky always is you have one that's at 27 and another one at 26. And so the minute we do the one, then the 26 are right there wanting theirs too. So where do we draw the line? So, you know, what we really do look at are the guidelines that you provide us. That's not to say, I mean, we are so preliminary right now for enrollment that and some of these that are hot, we call them hot spots that we just watch constantly. And, you know, between Mrs. Schwartz and I, we're in constant contact with the principals and the school, you know, assistants, because we want to know, did anyone move? Did anyone come in? So we are continuously watching it and to say, when is it the time to add another teacher, if that's feasible, or to put cap and send in?
You do this, I'm going by my past experience, we could never hire until August. I think that's changed. Is that accurate?
Yeah, so once we look at all the intra-district transfers over the next couple of weeks, we'll see if that affects one way or the other. And we'll start looking at enrollment, but I would say that Dr. Pearson has worked very closely with me, that we look at it in May, we look at it again in June. We would like it all done and completed by mid-July if we could. And that's why when those students come right the week before school, those are the most difficult ones. And I work really closely with the building principals at that time for what is the best thing that you feel. And many times if the students have already met their teachers and know who their teachers are, that sometimes it's better to just stay and then cap the rest of the students to another place, some of the new people coming in. So it sounds like there should be one way we look at it always, but there's so much criteria that we put into it to make it the best ideal size that we can.
And my last question, are you seeing any difference between all day and half day right now? There's been some...
You know, so I think what you have to realize is kindergarten registration took place before the pandemic set in. So our numbers that we have versus all day versus half day are pretty much the same they've been every year at this time. So at this point, we do not. But we don't know if that's going to change over the next month or so as, you know, people start registering again.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
So I do want to actually just kind of clarify something. I think there was a comment, a citizen's comment, where there was maybe a point of confusion regarding why we decided to put this on the agenda. I do want to clarify that this topic was planned to be on the agenda, I don't know, pretty much all year. That it was not put on because of the school closure, remote learning. So that I want to clarify.
Yep, I think I asked for it before January, I believe. So, yeah.
I'm going to say you asked in November.
Okay.
Yeah, and I had been talking to Jan about it too. I think we have been both wanting to discuss this. So I do think I like the idea of the roll up. I'm just concerned about the first grade as well. So, and maybe I'm remembering it incorrectly, and I know you've said it twice now. Is it kindergarten and first grade, or just kindergarten and then the next year kindergarten and first grade, right?
What we suggested was kindergarten for the 2021 and then first kindergarten and first grade for the 2021-22 school year.
Yeah.
Those are just too big a numbers to say and make sense. Did that help?
Yeah, no, I just want to make sure I had that plan firmly in my head. I think I would like to see kindergarten and first grade for the first year. Is that then doable space-wise, given our numbers?
I would have to go back and look at that one more time to make sure. I should have it here, but I'm sure Mr. Moore might be out there looking at it right now as we speak.
Give me a minute.
Well, and the other question that was brought up was in regards to finance and being able to kind of budget for that, for the possibility of new hires. So
now, is there an issue with physical space by implementing this K through 2 in year 1 here, or for next school year?
Yeah, and that's what's part of the presentation, that if we would be 5 classrooms short this coming school year if we implemented K2.
Okay. What about, I guess, Mr. Moore's possibly looking at this, just kindergarten and first grade for next year?
I think that's what he's looking at right now.
It is. He's looking at that, and so we have to look at it 2 ways. We have to look at the cost, and also if all schools have enough space for it. And so I think that what I'd like him to look at first is the cap at 25, because the cap at 20, we know it really makes it very difficult for us to have enough space.
Will Empower classes be using any classrooms, or will those be in the grade level classrooms?
So that I did not include Empower as taking the classroom as I did this presentation. So the numbers you're getting are for Empower to be in the LRC in an empty classroom, if there is one, or in the teacher's classrooms. It can be held wherever we need to.
So Empower is flexible enough, is what you're saying, to not really impact this as far as classroom space?
Yes.
And that was probably the one question I had was two programs, and when we're talking about space, those 2 programs not being at odds with one another.
I have a question.
Okay.
So, how do we reconcile the shortage of classrooms if we go to full implementation in 2021? Is the assumption that with declining enrollment that resolves itself?
So full implementation would be till 22-23. Or are you saying if we went to K2 next year? We could also look at the location of our special programs, and we don't like to move them, but there are times that we have to when we need additional space in a building.
Okay.
To another building.
Okay.
Because it's only 1 classroom next year. That would be the issue if we kept with the 25 model.
Okay.
Okay, and are we waiting for an answer, or are we?
I'm almost there. I'm almost there.
All right. Does anybody
Well,
have any other questions?
Mr. McNally, while Mr. Moore is working on that, I just want to bring up the point that if we do move to this 25 model, that it will significantly increase our cap and send. You know, we've kind of gotten away from cap and send and trying to keep students in their home school. But to accomplish this goal, which is, you know, is important, there will be students that will be capped and sent then from their elementary school to another elementary school. And when we do that, we provide transportation, and we typically allow them to stay in their new school through the time that they matriculate out of that building. So if we cap and send a kindergartner, they get to stay at their new school all the way until they're in the 5th grade. So we would need to look at that procedure and see if that's still what you want to do. But it doesn't necessarily mean that a class is going to be added at that particular building. When we hit that 26th child, more than likely that kid is going to be going somewhere else to a different elementary school.
Well, and they're relatively minimal, relatively speaking, but there are costs associated with that too, when you're talking about doing that for 5 years or 6 years.
And I have a question, 2 questions about that. And when you cap and send, that doesn't mean the siblings are going, correct?
So we do it different ways, that if we have to cap and send and we have space for the siblings, because usually we cap and send new students. We don't cap and send existing students because they've already been in that building. It's our new move-ins that come in to make the change. And so we always, if we have room for the siblings, we will allow the siblings to go with.
So
in the new building.
So intra-district waivers, how do they impact cap and send?
They shouldn't at all.
Okay.
So when we look at the intra-district waivers, we first of all look at it as the district. We look across the whole district, because you'll notice, I mean, that in most grade levels, you might have 2 kids going out and 2 kids wanting to come in. So it's a wash at times, but other times we can let the 2 go out, but we can't let the 2 come in because we need to keep within the class size guidelines. So that's why now we do it every year. And our goal is never to move kids back and forth every year. You know, once they're in at a new school, and if we can keep them there and stay within our guidelines, we do allow that. But the reason we ask people to reapply every year now is if in case we come into a situation where we're not able to accommodate it anymore, that we can make those changes. We do on the intra-district transfers, parents have to send one in for every child, a separate one for every child in their household. And there are times we can say we can offer it for your 3rd grader, but not your 2nd and 5th.
And then they can decide whether they accept that.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So a family who might move in September might be the cap and send, even though there are intra-district waivered kids in that classroom, correct?
For that year.
For that year. Oh, and then a new kid could come back to the school?
Yes, the following year. Mm-hmm.
And you would
if there's room.
The waivers.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Yes.
Now, as far as the cap and send is concerned, it's with siblings, they don't have to apply for intra-district waivers for that. Am I correct? They're essentially automatically, and are they automatically at that other school for the duration? So say you have somebody who's kept and send at kindergarten, or let's say 1st grade, they had a kindergarten sibling. Would that kindergarten sibling then be guaranteed a spot in that school?
So is it an older sibling or a younger? If it's someone who's not in school yet, then they would have to apply for an intra-district transfer when they start kindergarten.
Right, but like say you've got a 1st grader and a kindergartner. So the kindergartner's already in school. They would be able to just pick 2 schools if it's Munhall and Anderson. So they're kept and sent from Munhall to Anderson. Then the younger sibling could also go. Would the younger sibling then be guaranteed to be able to remain at Anderson throughout 5th grade as well?
That's what we have done in the past. Yes,
Oh.
and not to change, because we're the ones who had to move them. They didn't ask to be moved.
It was outside the power of the
Yes.
individual.
Mm-hmm.
That's, I want wanted to clarify that point. That's what I thought was the case, but
Right, but
okay.
just so you know, in the last 3 years, since we lowered from 29 to 27 and did our rebounding, we maybe have had 1, possibly 2 students that have had to be capped and send, except for a few 5th graders at times. But then they go on to the middle school the next year. So it's really our planning really did keep our schools in the right class size guidelines. Mr.
Okay.
Moore, did you have it? Did we give you enough time?
Plenty of time. I'm just excited I got to raise my hand. The answer is yes, we do have space if it's kindergarten and 1st grade next year.
Okay.
How about a cost, Mr. Moore? Do you look at that or not?
It's about 2 more teachers, so another 140,000 roughly on top of the kindergarten only plan.
So it would be the 140 plus the 90,000.
140.
So
oh, plus the
230.
specials, so 140 and 60% of 70 is 40, so about 180,000.
So you have about 270,000 additional.
Yeah, that was on top of the kindergarten plan. Each
Okay, so
elementary
would be roughly $270,000 to do K through 1 as opposed to just kindergarten.
Yeah, kindergarten would be 90, and then an additional 180,000.
Oh, all right. So the marginal cost would be up 180. Okay, all right.
Yeah, each teacher has an average cost of 70,000, and then at elementary, specials is about a third of about 30% of a teacher. So what, about 20 to 22,000 for the specials.
Okay. All right. Okay. Any other?
Yep.
Okay.
Dr. Pearson, you mentioned that this would significantly impact the cap and send numbers. Do you have an estimate on what significant is? How many additional students are we possibly thinking with who will be capped and sent?
No, well, I don't have. I guess what I'm trying to say is we've worked to try to reduce the number of students that were capped and sent. And we were able to accomplish that. As Jan mentioned, I think we've had 1 or 2 in the last couple of years. We're going to be back in a situation where it's probably going to be in the dozens eventually by the time we, start to kind of see some of these classes fill up at these different buildings. So, I'm okay with that. I just wanted you to know as a board that would be a change that would happen as a result of this that maybe you weren't anticipating. That just means that then those kids are living in one area. Most of the kids in that area go to this school, but they're going to a nearby elementary school. And that's worked for us in the past. Prior to the rebounding that was done a couple of years ago, we had quite a bit of that going on across the district. And as one of the things that increasing the number of sections at a building has done for us is it's given us kind of more spots for students. And so that helped us reduce the number. So it's hard to predict, but I think it's going to go from 1 or 2 to probably, 12, 15, 20, something like that.
I think the idea of increasing that number does not sit well with me. I think, long-term, our facility study, when that gets completed, I think we as a board possibly need to have a little better discussion about the boundaries that we have at our elementary school. I know that's not a topic many people want to discuss, but I feel that could possibly be something that we need to discuss long-term solutions, so we don't have to cap and send anyone, and at the same time we can keep our student numbers, our class sizes down.
Well, but I also think you have to remember that it doesn't matter what your boundaries are or what your facilities are. When you hit that 26, whatever the number is over your cap, that 26 student, what do you do with that? And sometimes it makes sense to add another section, especially if there are more sections in the building. If you go from 5 to 6, it has less of an impact than when you go from 2 to 3, which is one of the reasons why the boundaries that were redone were done in the way that they were done, so that we could have 3 and 4 section buildings. But whenever you hit that one student that goes over that number, do you now reduce the size in that building to 17 or 18 in a class, or do you cap and send that student? So every single situation is variable. So it's hard to predict, no matter how well you plan the boundaries, what the impact is going to be. So you just have to have a strategy that you use.
Do you think, I think I'm like Mr. Bryant, that cap and send is no fun, and it can really upset a family. So if we were to just stay with kindergarten for now to see how it rolled out, there's a chance. We never know what our real kindergarten enrollment is because we don't always know where they are. That might be a piece, and we can see how it looks before we roll it up to first grade. I'm a little concerned about the cost, and I think I have some other questions that I'm not sure with what our teacher contract says and all of that as well. So I guess my big question is, when do you need to have from the board a decision on this particular topic?
Well, we're working on the budget right now, so we need to know if you need us to include additional teachers in the budget for lowering class size at these buildings. Again, I think we're up against a timeline where May is the right time, June is late, July is too late.
So it's something we could talk about at business services and then determine whether to vote on it in May.
Yes, we can talk about it at business services. What are you wanting us to bring back to business services? The cost?
Well, I think we know it's 90,000 for if it's just kindergarten, correct? Yeah. And maybe we already know everything. I don't know what the other board members. I was doing the cap and send concern like Mr. Bryant, but I wouldn't mind being able to lower class sizes too.
So, sorry, Ed, go ahead.
No, I was going to say for my part, first of all, I am not, I'm not excited about the prospect of having another discussion about boundaries. Those are never pleasant. And the unfortunate thing is that I think no matter, as I think Dr. Pearson said, no matter what boundaries you set, you're going to probably have an outlier somewhere that's going to end up being capped and sent. I think what we're trying to determine here, and correct me if I'm wrong, but I think we're trying to determine what it is at this meeting we like to send for approval. Kindergarten, K1 or K2. I think K2 is probably off the table for discussion based on what I've heard. But kindergarten or K1, am I understanding correctly? That you'd like to have that decided this evening so that we can determine what we're going to send to the board meeting.
I think that would be, if we had that would be great that we could go. But I also think then if there's, as you're talking about the budget at business services, you'll have the information that you need for that too.
Okay.
And I'm wondering, do you look at the K, send both the K and the K1 and to action?
If we did that, we'd have to send the K1 first. And then if that didn't pass, then the K alone. I'm leaning myself toward kindergarten by itself right now, but I'm not sure yet what my thoughts are. So,
Dr. Pearson, would you suggest something else?
No, I think that's fine. I think after we have a conversation Monday, maybe people will kind of know more what we're looking at.
Okay.
So we can do it that way. Whatever we do, we need to put it on for action.
Okay. So we'll kick kind of part of the discussion, at least for the financial aspect of business services, and then we'll go from there. Okay. Does that sound good to everyone here? Any further discussion on the matter? Okay. Then I think we can move on to item E, annual renewals recommended for consent. Looks like there are 4. Does anybody have any concerns, comments, questions on that item? Okay, and I'm sorry, I just lost my screen over here. So if you give me just a second here. I was sitting.
Ed.
Yes. Are you there?
Yeah, I was just saying, I don't see any yet, Ed. I don't see anyone looking to.
Yeah, I lost my screen for the next item, so I didn't see anyone either. So I think we can then move on to item F, middle school administration. And is there anything to be discussed there?
Yeah, I'm going to let Mr. Moore talk a little bit about this. We're recommending a change at the middle school. I think one of the things that you as a board asked us to do was, as we finally consolidated into 2 larger middle schools, to take some time and look at the staffing at the middle school that particularly supports students. And we have looked at the administrative staffing there, and we have a recommendation going forward for some additional staff to help with supervision in the building, but then also some staff to help with supporting students who might be struggling. So Mark, do you want to talk a little bit about that?
Sure. So as you know, the current structure at the middle school is we have 1 principal and 3 assistant principals. Then we also have 2 dean's assistants at each school. Dean's assistants are support staff who provide safety, security, and monitoring for the building. We are proposing for next year to move to a structure where we add 1 additional administrator, but change the structure. So we'd have 1 principal, 2 assistant principals instead of 3, and 2 deans of students, which is not currently a position that exists at the middle school, but has been at the high school for decades. So it's in addition of 1 administrator, and it also converts 1 12-month administrator to a 10-month. So the deans don't work through the full summer, but assistant principals do. In addition, we would add 2 more dean's assistants at each school to provide more safety and security and really eyes on the building during the day, during arrival, during the day, and during dismissal. It's a position we've had at the high school for decades and is very successful in providing those functions to the school. The middle school started adding dean's assistants, I think less than 10 years ago. They had 1 for quite a while. They went up to 2 about a year ago, and now we're asking to go to 4. Part of the way we pay for some of this is as the enrollment at the high school starts to decline, we can remove 1 administrative assistant position from each building strictly through attrition. We have a number of admin assistants who are retiring. So it's just a matter of not filling the job. Nobody would lose their job because of this at the high schools. And then just one last point. This might take 2 years to phase in at the middle schools because we don't, of course, want to change any one person who is an AP into a dean, but we do expect that over time, some of the assistant principals will move on to principalships, whether they're in 303 or not, therefore vacating the position. For next year, we've already got 1 who's retired. That's Dr. Honnert. So we have 1 position at Thompson, and at Redling, we'll see. We are confident that this will provide the additional support for safety, security, for teacher support, for student being able to focus more on intervention and less on reactionary discipline, and then support for teachers. Deans are administrators, so they evaluate teachers. They work on instructional improvement for a portion of their job, not as much as principal and AP, but by restructuring the duties of those 4 or 5 people, we are confident in providing additional support for middle school. Thank you.
All right. Any questions, comments, concerns on that?
Yeah, Mr. Moore, it seems like much of the new positions revolve around discipline, what supports are there going to be any supports in this new model that would alleviate the work that the counselors are doing? I know at the middle school they have quite a large load where they're seeing 500, I think 500 to 1 is their ratio. They're responsible for 504 coordination, risk assessments. So is there going to be any help in that area with this new plan?
I'm looking at Mr. Leversky. I think he can probably answer that question the best.
Yep. There are some things we're doing in our middle schools and we're moving towards right now. First of all, our MTSS implementation, multi-tiered system of support, is probably one of the biggest things we're doing, which is how do we define clear expectations on a tier 1 level? How do we support and reteach them on a tier level? How do we more intensely support them on a tier 3 level? If we do that work really effectively, along with bringing in some restorative practices, which we're doing through the Department of Interventional, Patty, help me with that. Yeah, she's just shaking her head.
Instructional interventions.
The DOE department. We should be in good shape. We should be in better shape. It's still a challenge for our counselors for some of those things, but the dean will work on things like getting kids to school. We'll work on supporting the kids. We have hallway in building supervised study right now, so we'll be able to work with those kids more effectively. The dean can work with those families more specifically on additional supports we just haven't been able to do right now. So we really view it as an opportunity for those deans to work with some of our more intensive students, along with their counselors, to be able to bring down some issues pretty quickly.
Now, with the with 2 dean of students, is that typical for the size middle schools that we have? What are some of the staffing levels at comparable middle schools in the area?
So it really varies from middle school to middle school. A year ago, I looked at what staffing numbers are in what positions. They all have different positions with different names that have different roles. So some schools have not department chairs, but athletic directors who also serve as disciplinarians and manage some of that, or safety coordinators. So really what I discovered was there is no set model. There is no specific structure out there that is relatable to any of us. Nothing common that I could find.
Thank you.
Okay.
A question.
Oh,
Yeah.
there we go.
So am I right that right now the assistant principals are assigned to a grade level? How do you see that being different, since you won't have 3 deans or 3 assistant principals? How does that change things?
I actually talked to my team this morning about that. We're kicking around various ideas. Thinking out loud, one of the things we talked about today is with 2 assistant principals and a principal, the administrators in those roles could focus on a primary grade level, including the principal, and then you would have the support of 2 deans that would directly and immediately support transportation, and the other dean, transportation in 1 grade level, and the other dean could do 2. The reality is we try not to compartmentalize like that, because we're all dealing with all of our kids. We just need to find that nice sweet spot so we can be as responsive and proactive as possible. And just simply having the additional administrative support would allow our small problems to be addressed in the moment much more quickly than before they get to be big problems.
Thank you.
I wanted to talk a little bit about this. Obviously, this is, issues of safety and discipline. And I know that there are practices that are being put in place that will help support some changes in that area. My concern with the title and the role of a dean, that really brings about kind of that junior high model where, and it also can create a situation where now you have a place for kids really to be sent just to deal with discipline. And I would almost like to see support. Is there another way this can look? I understand the need to be more efficient. I don't know that that role in middle school has always worked out.
Would you like me to comment, Mr. Moore? Please. Through the lens of a middle school child right now, the reality at Thompson, I'm the principal and the assistant principals are the acting deans. So some of that is a matter of semantics. But I do know that our middle schools, we pride ourselves that we are all interchangeable and we respond to situations. We have large middle schools. We have great kids, but when you've got 1,400 kids in an environment whose frontal lobe's not yet developed, they're gonna make poor choices in the moment, and we need to support them like crazy. We could address perhaps what those titles of those roles look like, but at the end of the day, the amount of skilled adults, however many more of those people we can get in our large middle schools, the more proactive, the more effective, the greater the focus on learning we'll be able to have. And that's my 2 cents. Also with the renovation of Thompson, our buildings are large. We've got, I don't know how many exit doors. The addition of dean's assistants to allow more adults to be throughout the building is a huge comfort for kids. And it is also yet another group of people who are intentional about trying to make relationships with the children to encourage them to make good choices. So I don't know that we would say we're understaffed at this point administratively, but I will say because of our current staffing levels, we are forced out of necessity to be much more reactive than we hope we can get with more staffing to be much more proactive.
Anyone else? Sounds like somebody's waiting, but I can't hear who. No? Okay, but I'll weigh in myself here. My own thought has always been throughout my entire career in education is that if you don't have an ordered building, none of the other stuff we're discussing is relevant. If we don't have order and structure within the building, then we can talk about all the ethereal aspects of everything else and it doesn't matter. So if this is something that's necessary to that end, I'm in support of it. Any other thoughts on the matter?
I just want to just make sure that, you know, I think if we're adding positions, that they need to be working directly with students to best benefit them, especially you know, socially and emotionally. So again, we're creating these positions, but making sure that they are working with students is important to me.
Yeah, I don't want to create paperwork positions. I want people who are actually physically doing something and to maintain the control and order of the building.
And we really view those positions as doing that, exactly that, Mr. McNally, which is getting into, first of all, working with kids, Mr. Bryant, you know, working with those challenging kids who are struggling with understanding their current levels of behavior and how to respond, working with counselors and social workers to develop and build those skills, building wide along, you know, as we kind of go up the RTI pyramid, building wide, but they have to be, and I don't think Steve and I see them any other way, incredibly hands-on with some of our kiddos who need some additional supports.
I just want to reassure the board that we don't want adults in the building who are certified or program assistants whose first priority is not always working with kids, all the way up to the principal. We go to work every day to support and have a positive impact on those children, and that's every adult in that building. And if they see it otherwise, I don't want them in my building.
Okay.
I appreciate that sentiment. I would like to consider that the title is different than dean. I think that brings about some old ideas. And I would like to consider if we could be sent the job description then.
Yeah, and to that point, your comment a little bit earlier, Mrs. Barker, just kind of triggered in my mind. You know, we looked at supports at the middle school, the elementary level, and we added that student support interventionist position, which really has some responsibility for helping with student behavior, but there's other things that are part of that role. So it's possible that we could take some of those kind of job duties and job descriptions, which certainly happen at the middle school, and really look at how we structure the job title and the position to kind of do some of those things as well as we think about our MTSS and behavioral support structure, in addition to the social and emotional piece.
Yeah, I would really like that. I do want to add what Ed said, a safe and orderly building. That's first and foremost. Just want to make sure we're doing it the right way.
Okay. All right. Any other conversation on that? Okay. So what then do you need from us tonight?
We're going to bring back the job description for you to approve. So we'll put a job description together, and we'll just have you approve that to some of the things that we heard today. We'll try to incorporate that so that you're comfortable with kind of what this position looks like going forward.
Okay. All right. And I believe that concludes the learning and teaching portion, and I can hand the baton over to Mr. Bryant for the policy. Mr. Bryant.
Thank you very much, Mr. McNally.
Okay.
So the policy committee will be starting now. There are 3 items on the agenda. There are a few different policies that need to be updated either for legal references. There are a few minor changes to a few policies. And then also approval of the student handbooks and discipline. Now, Mr. Moore and I, we talked last week about a few different policies that we as a board, we decided that we wanted to have further discussions on. But at the same time, I think, right now is probably not the best time, and just to keep it simple and focus on what needs to be done is probably best. So yeah, there are only a few policies that are going to be discussed, and then discipline as well. So Mr. Moore, would you want to add anything to that?
No, that is definitely what we talked about. I do just want to mention that the new policy manual is active on the website. It is hosted by Press, the IASB, and it is much more user-friendly than our old one. Because we've moved to the Press Plus online manual, the way you'll see policies presented is different than you're used to. So what's in our packet comes directly from Press. What we used to do is Ms. Marsand would take the policies from Press, retype them, put them in colors, and so on. Now we just take their documents exactly. So if you see something like a misspelled word or a space out of place, one of those things that drive me up the wall, and I'm sure some of you too, Press takes care of those later. So you don't have to worry about any of those kinds of things. We're not changing them on the proposed, they'll get fixed. These are all of the policies that they're asking the board to adopt in Press Manual 103. That's another part that you'll start seeing is each time they put out an update, it has a number. So through the policy manual you adopted a couple months ago, we were current through 102. This brings us up to 103. There's a couple policies in here I'd like to highlight because they require a decision to be made. So unlike when we did this ourselves, where we'd have to say, well, do we really want to do this? Why is it? Press Plus is presenting us with the policies where we actually have, where you, the board, have discretion in what it says. So there's a couple where you have decisions to make. The others are either required by statute. So a number of them are related to the federal grant statutes where really we don't have any decisions to make. And some of them are strictly updating legal references. So the policies don't change at all. It's just the law of reference. And typically we don't talk about those at the table. Of course, I can answer questions if you have them, but those policies aren't changing. So the first one we need to look at is the first one in the packet. It's 2:125. And this is one where they're asking us, asking you as a board to make a decision. And it's kind of a silly decision. This one is, if board members were to travel on an airplane and pay for a checked bag, should you get reimbursed or not for the checked bag fee? Our recommendation is, of course you should. It's part of the trip. So that's our recommendation. A following policy extends that to employees, and you would want the same. Well, my recommendation is you'd have the same thing for both. So is there any objection to including reimbursement for a checked bag fee in the instance we were reimbursing for an airline ticket for board or employee people?
No objection from me.
Any other objections?
No.
Everything else in those policies comes from the somewhat relatively recent federal grant laws.
All right, so we're good on that one?
I think so.
All right. Do you want to go to policy 2-160 then?
Sure, we can go through that way. 160 is talking about the board attorney. Most of it's just rewritten, and it says that you as a board can hire a board attorney through any process you really want. Our current policy and the policy here says that the superintendent or designee and the board president is authorized to confer with board counsel. And then the board can choose to authorize a specific board member to confer with the board attorney. None of that's new. It is what the policy has been. They just wrote it a little differently. And I just lost everybody.
We can still hear you, Mr. Moore.
Okay, good.
All right. Do you want to go through each one of these, or do you want to go through just the ones that require? I guess there are multiple policies here that are just updating legal references. Yeah. I don't know if we need to.
What if we jump to 770 and 790? Because that's one where a decision has to be made. And then if you have questions on other ones, we can go back to them.
Okay.
So in 770 and 790, this is one where the specific language is optional, but following the law, of course, is not. The legislature in Illinois created a new absence for students on election day, where students are entitled to 2 hours of excused absence on a school day to vote. That apart, of course, because it's law, is not optional. The question is do we as a district want to designate which 2 hours they get to go vote? I would recommend that we don't want to designate those 2 hours for a couple of reasons. One, this only applies to 17 and 18-year-olds, so it's a small subset of the district. And two, I think it's better for us, if a student is going to take advantage of this, for them to decide that it's better for them to miss first hour than it is for them to decide whichever class period we say they need to be gone. If we say the 2 hours are from 7 to 9 in the morning, but it's better for the kid by whatever their class is that day to miss the end of the day, they should just do that. So I would not recommend adopting this language. I think it's more restrictive on students than we need to be.
Any comments on that? Not adopting.
I agree with that too. I just want to say, I don't think we want those restrictions.
I agree.
All right, so those are the only two where we had to answer a question for press. Are there questions on any of the other policies?
Not seeing anyone raising their hand.
Nope.
So then should we put the policy updates on for consent then for the May meeting?
Yes, I think consent.
I agree.
Okay.
I
So
agree.
you'll see that Ms. Barker holds up a consent sign. I think you'll see on the final packet, it won't be exactly what you saw here because the language will incorporate the questions you just answered. So what you'll see is based on what press says, based on your yes or no answer. Thank you.
Excellent. All right, then let's go to the next agenda item, which is the student handbooks.
Okay, so Aubrey Schuett is with us tonight to discuss the handbooks and the discipline addendum. Every year, the discipline committee meets and makes adjustments. This year, I think we have the smallest number of changes that I certainly ever remember. So Aubrey, if you'd like to just kind of highlight the few changes, and then we'll take questions. And the handbook changes and the addendum changes are very similar.
Yes, sure, thanks. So I had provided you all a little bit of an executive summary that kind of highlights the process that we stepped through this year with the committee. And it outlines a couple components. I think one of the primary things that we did as a group is we stepped through a short book study and really trying to broaden our understanding of restorative practices and thinking through that lens as we looked at the handbooks and the discipline addendum this year and making recommendations for updates. When we think about the handbooks, the student handbooks, specifically there was, it was brought to our attention that there was some confusion with a statement within the dress code. The committee reviewed that, had some pretty robust discussion and decided that the statements that preceded the sentence that was removed and the statements that followed really did the best job in clarifying that, and we're comfortable with removing that statement to help provide more clarity for implementation. Within the elementary handbooks, we were able to add the updated elementary school day times, start and end times, as well as there was a clerical error on the electronic device clause in which we inadvertently left out the word not. And then, so we added that back in to help provide clarity there. The rest of the information in the handbooks remained consistent outside of adding a paragraph to help increase and establish common language and understanding of restorative practices. So we added a paragraph outlining restorative practices in each of the handbook, and that paragraph is consistent and also reflected in the discipline addendum directly after the MTSS paragraph there.
Yeah,
Any questions about the handbook?
I just want to jump in and talk about the restorative practices paragraph. I think, you know, it definitely aligns with best practices and what what is happening in our schools now and what's best for kids. So I think that's great to see in there. Are there any other questions on that?
No, I'm just thankful that that the wording is being changed to reflect the restorative practices. And I'm excited to see what next year brings with training the staff and everything. So.
Yeah, thank you. I appreciate that. To speak to that, we did have a training scheduled with the International Institute of Restorative Practices for this June. So sad that we needed to just postpone it a little bit, but I am in conversations with them and it looks like we'll be able to do that in September. I think both the International Institute of Restorative Practices and I, we're in agreement that there is so much value in the face-to-face component with the restorative piece, that trying to replicate that remotely, you'd really miss a large part of the value that comes from that. So we've got, we're finalizing dates for September. So I'm excited to be able to still provide that for our staff.
All right. Any other questions or comments? I know they are very similar, but also agenda item I, the addendum, the discipline procedures. Would you like to share a little bit about that, Ms. Schuett?
Yeah, sure. So like I just mentioned, we added the same restorative practices paragraph into the addendum. And then we also had some feedback from a member of our parent community related to a statement that the committee ultimately is recommending be removed from the interventions and actions section of the handbook. And ultimately, what we discovered is that the statement itself was pretty much redundant because it's captured through the disciplinary procedure section that is before the prohibited conduct section of the handbook. And we felt it was pretty misplaced. And really, ultimately, what it comes down to is like, you know, that in the way that the handbook is laid out, that we're about to start talking about interventions and actions to support a student and help reteach some skills and strategies. And we felt like it was just not in the right place and that it was captured better elsewhere. The other thing that we did was we talked about some specific restorative strategies that we wanted to implement and include into the interventions list. And so we've identified restorative circles and restorative conferencing within that list as potential interventions and actions teams could rely on to help support students. The other piece that was a point of discussion was removing the word disciplinary surrounding the interventions and actions section. And specifically, what the conversation surrounded was many of those items that are listed on the interventions list are used both productively and reactively. So they're used in multiple ways. And we didn't want it to highlight, since oftentimes when we hear people talk about discipline, it's reactive or, you know, something is like a consequence is being provided. And instead, we really wanted to reflect the restorative language and make sure we kept that section focused on interventions and teaching.
Excellent, thank you. Any questions or comments on the discipline procedures? All right, then we can put that on for action as well then, I assume?
The handbooks, we usually just put up for information, so you don't need to vote on those. But the discipline addendum, yes, needs to be acted on. So perhaps for consent, sounds like everyone's okay.
Yep. Okay. Consent it is.
Okay, thank you very much.
I think that is it then. Mr. McNally, Ms. Barker, the two of you had most of this meeting, so I'll send it back to you two to wrap it up here then.
I think all there is right now to say we are adjourned. And I'll see you Monday at Business Services.
Future items.
Oh, I'm sorry, future items, you are correct. And I am not on the right screen here. I'm sorry, I'm off that screen on the other computer here.
Would you like me to share them?
If
Mr.
you would,
McNally, I
please.
can
Yeah.
share them for you if you'd like.
You have them. Yes,
Sure.
please.
So we have Anderson Title I School-Wide Waiver, College and Career Readiness Programs, Transitional Math Resources, the Phonemic Awareness Resource for Primary and Elementary, All-Day Kindergarten, and then of course any more of the subscription renewals.
And I do not have future agenda items in front of me right now, but we will be meeting on June 15th for policy.
All right. I think we're done then. So our next meeting will be Business Services next Monday. Is that correct?
Correct.
All right. Then I guess I will see everyone, or most of you, many of you anyway, there. And some of you get to stay. Well, we're all staying home, I guess. Some of you get to not have to log on. How's that? So, all right, at 7:43, I think we're done.
Thank you.
Thank you.